Hello, you're listening to Count Richard von Coudenhove Kalergi. Today is Tuesday, the 14th of January, and here's a couple of comments since my last video. This Sunday, on RTE, the Not My Taoiseach had a car crash interview with the presenter where 3 times he got his facts and figures wrong, one of which was regarding the number of people waiting on hospital appointments. 500,000 people, imagine that, out of a population of 500, of just shy of 5 million people, 500,000 were waiting on appointments. And also this week it was being revealed that 3,000 people were waiting in hospital trolleys, 560 today alone. Also about the lady found wandering around O'Connell Street, 81 years old, discharged from hospital, and was thankfully found by people who were operating a soup kitchen. Like, how on earth does somebody at that age get released from hospital without anybody knowing where she has to go or where to stay? A friend of mine, interesting enough, was passing through Hong Kong, where he spent 3 days, and found the people in Hong Kong to be extremely rude and racist. And in fact, one incident where she got on a bus and asked the driver a question, he said, "No English, get out." So maybe Hazel Chu should keep that in mind next time she accuses the Irish of being so racist. And this week also saw the BT Young Science exhibition. And I'd like to go back 2 years, if I may, to 2018, when a school in Waterford did a project called From Wonder Woman to Daddy Pig, general trends that show sexist conditioning of children through TV and film, with men being particularly portrayed in a negative way at almost every opportunity. And this year, the winner this year came from Cork on gender stereotyping, starting with children as young as 5 to 7 years old. And just to be mindful that all this nonsense is social science, is not a science, and people are being duped by this Marxist crap and left-wing propaganda that will blame their college debt on capitalism and should be trained people to be skilled workers instead of social activists. Now, on the day, the government announced that they were going to commemorate the RIC, the Dublin Metropolitan Police, and the Black and Tans. I visited Dublin Castle with a lady friend of mine and fellow patriot, and we had an excellent tour by a very nice young lady, and I had an opportunity to speak to her afterwards about Chris Fogarty's book about the Irish Holocaust, and mentioned that libraries were reluctant to actually put it on their shelves. And I seemed to have sparked an interest in the fact that she had studied the famine for her history degree, so I hope she takes that information on board. Now, it was also interesting to note that by the time we actually made inquiries about attending the event on January the 17th, we're told that we had to send in emails. But I'd just like to relay something which happened in Dublin Castle, and that was on the 21st of November 1920, and that was the day that Collins and his men took out 15 members of what was known as the Cairo Gang, which was a British intelligence gang that used to have coffee in a coffee shop in Grafton Street called Cafe Cairo. And he killed 15 of them on that particular morning. Later on that afternoon, the army showed up at Croke Park, and 14 members of the public were killed, with 63 wounded afterwards. Now, later on that night in Dublin Castle, 3 members of the IRA, Pater Clancy, Dick McKee, and Conor Clune, were shot, beaten beyond recognition, and shot allegedly while trying to escape. And they were commemorated in 2 Dublin barracks and one down the country. Now, later on that night, the government had a rethink on this stupidity and decided that they were going to postpone the event due to the backlash. So it was interesting, within a 12-hour period, they had got so many people annoyed that they changed their mind. Now, interestingly, the Wolf Tones that had the song, 1972 song, "Come Out You Black and Tans," went to number 1 in Ireland and the UK, and is now number 4 in the Australian charts. So I'm sure they're delighted for the publicity, and in fact they have said that they would deny it any royalties from Australia towards a fund to help with the tragedy of the fire out there. I'd also like to recommend or suggest that people look up irishreplacement.com, and they're set up by a young man who I'd met a couple of times in Barrow Street over the summer and had the pleasure of having a cup of coffee with him a few times. But it's a good site to check up, and he does an awful lot of homework on that, and please look at it. And RTE actually did something useful during the week. They let out a little gem regarding the CO2 and data centres. Now at the moment there's 51 data centres in Ireland, and they expect another 31 to be built within the next 7 years, and they believe that it will use up to 33% of all the electricity in Ireland. So you think that we'll be paying the carbon tax on the electricity, and yet a third of it is going to be used by these corporations. And Amazon alone has 7 of them based in Dublin. Now the Taoiseach has also called for the election to be taking place on Saturday the 8th of February. So I wish all the nationalist parties the very best of luck in how they approach their campaign. And I would suggest I'm gonna use a quote from Matthew 10:16, and that is, "What I'm doing is I'm sending you out like sheep among wolves. You must be clever as a serpent and innocent as a dove." So they have to be mindful of their language, be very careful what they have to say, and get their point across. And I wish them all the very best, and I hope they do very well. And it'll be a very interesting election. And I'd also like to end on a quote from Marcus Aurelius, who was an emperor for 20 years in Rome and died in AD 80. And that is, "The object of life is not to be on the side of the majority, but to escape finding oneself in the ranks of the insane." Now, on that note, I wish you good night, good luck, God bless, and the Logos is rising.